Meanwhile, the rest of the Sentinel's army sat back and waited, trying desperately to think of what to do. Almost none of them aside from the emissaries left the Pantheon in this time of waiting. They were all gathered together, Vistor, Miser, Aggro, Foxtrot, and the Paradox Master, sitting in the meeting room trying to think of a plan of action. We need a replacement Sentinel, it's as simple as that. Miser proposed the idea. You can't just replace someone because they're gone, Foxtrot said. Even if we did, who would replace the Sentinel? Vistor asked. No one can, he concluded for himself. What about a past Sentinel? Aggro looked toward the Paradox Master. You used to be a Sentinel, right? What's stopping you from being one again? The Paradox Master didn't answer the question. He held his amulet to his lips, thinking. And how do we get rid of Ray? He's been getting out of every situation he gets himself into. Aggro added. We kill him and right our wrong. Vistor stated simply. I think avoiding death is the best option. Foxtrot countered. You were responsible for making him the way he is. I think you should be responsible for bringing him back, fixing him. There's no coming back from what we did. I'm sorry. Vistor's voice grew quiet as he spoke. I'll find a way to keep my friend alive, Foxtrot assured Vistor. You know, Foxtrot, those clones on Parv did say that we could have some form of plasma control. Aggro reminded him. If we could train... I still think Aggro was right about the Paradox Master. Why couldn't you just go back to being a Sentinel again? Miser asked the Paradox Master, still having the thought linger in his mind. That was the old me. The Paradox Master answered. I'm not a Sentinel anymore. Right, but who's stopping you from being one again? Foxtrot argued. I think it's a brilliant plan. Vistor nodded his fat head in agreement. I can help, but I can't be the Sentinel. The Paradox Master persisted. I'm not going back to that. What's so different about it from being a Paradox Master? Aggro asked. Shut up. The Paradox Master clenched his fist. Yeah, it should be an easy switch back. Just call yourself a Sentinel again. I said shut up! The Paradox Master slammed his fist on the table. Vistor flinched a moment after, then slugged back away from the table slightly, not dropping eye contact with the Paradox Master. Why? Foxtrot spoke softly. For the multiverse? Miser reminded him. I can help. The Paradox Master repeated himself. But I'm not going back. Who knows? Maybe the universe might be better off without a Sentinel. I wouldn't exist without the Sentinel. Foxtrot reminded the Paradox Master. He's a bringer of life. And neither would Ray. The Paradox Master snapped. A Sentinel is nothing but an omen of death, and I will not be the cause of that anymore. Not again. The Paradox Master maintained his position. If you're adamant about finding a new Sentinel, then go ahead. I'm just not too sure it's a good idea. He stood up. I'm going back to the Axiverse. Yeah, thanks for the help. Aggro growled sarcastically before the Paradox Master left in a flash of light. Now what? Vistor mumbled. I don't like that Vax has been gone this long. Foxtrot stood from his seat. I'm going to try to find her. What do you think she's up to? Aggro asked. Hey, Miser held up his hand and waited for the group to acknowledge him. Vax knows the Sentinel better than anyone beside the Paradox Master, and she can control that plasma stuff. Are you suggesting what I think you are? Vistor asked him. Maybe. It's just an idea. Miser shrugged. Do you really think that she'd be able to think like the Sentinel? Make the same decisions he would have? Hold her own? As far as I've seen, she's just a little human. Vistor said, opposing the idea. She's more than that. Foxtrot insisted. But I don't think it's worth the risk. Foxtrot looked down and his voice became somber. Like I said, I'll go figure out what she's up to. Washington, D.C., 2062. Vax flashed into view just outside the White House in the dead of night. The ambient sound of the light drizzle was drained out by the passing traffic and people. Vax paced, trying her best not to cry. She waited until she heard a motorcycle approaching. The black motorcycle parked in front of Vax under the dim light of a street lamp. The rider took off their helmet and flipped their jet black curly hair. Quinn. Vax approached her. Quinn was older now, almost 26. Vax? Is that really you? Quinn asked. What are you doing here? Quinn was surprised to see someone she recognized from years before, but she could sense the urgency in the way Vax carried herself and knew that there was no time for catching up. You've been working for the White House for a while now, right? Vax asked to clarify if she had shown up at the right time. As an assassin, yes? Quinn clarified. Again, why are you here? Quinn, the Sentinel's dead. Vax choked on her words. He's dead. What? Quinn couldn't believe what Vax was saying. He can't be. He is. But I think I can bring him back. Vax explained with a glint of hope in her eye. How? Quinn asked. A Revstone. It preserved his plasmatic soul. I made one of the Sentinel when he died, but Ray's stole it and he's run off somewhere. I don't know where. Vax held her hands to her head. I have suspicion to believe that he's here. Please tell me I'm right. Vax held her breath in suspense, hoping that Siriv hadn't lied to her. Ray. Quinn pursed her lips. My partner and I have been after him for a while. He's back in this time for some reason. He has something to do with the Galactic War coming up, but we can't figure out what. None of what he's doing makes sense. He is here? Vax's eyes widened as her luck seemed to turn right then and there. She latched on to what little hope she had left. Is he indestructible? Does he have some sort of invisible shielding or something protecting him? Vax asked, frantic for answers. Yes, Quinn answered, nodding her head vigorously to convey to Vax that there was no way she could be mistaken. Vax's face beamed with excitement as she sighed with relief. He has the stone, Vax explained. He came here then, why? Vax shook her head. Look, I need you to get that stone and bring it to me, she begged. I'll try. Quinn nodded. Thank you. Vax flashed away. Quinn stood outside the White House gates for a while before deciding to enter. As she approached her room, she was stopped by her partner, Nick Tempest. Nick, we've got some intel on Ray. Quinn hung her jacket up on a wall hook. Nick Tempest was older now, about 17. His blonde hair messily pointed up, and he wore a red flannel over his shirt. Where is he? What is it? He asked Quinn. It's about the Sentinel. Quinn leaned against a wall and faced Nick. Nick stood in silence. Who? He said in monotone, pretending he didn't recognize the name. He looked away from Quinn. The Sentinel? Quinn repeated, despite her knowing full well that Nick knew who he was. I thought I escaped that name. Nick said. So you don't think his name's a good thing then? Quinn observed. Why else do you think I'm an assassin? When I was 7, he lived in my house with my mom, my aunt, and my sister. It was because of him that my aunt moved me to my granddad's house in D.C. It was because of him that I was separated from my family. Nick ran his hands through his hair in frustration, holding his head in his hands. That bastard ruined my life. My mom's dead. And I haven't seen my sister in ages. The Sentinel's dead. Quinn stared at Nick's face intently. He died sometime in the future, and he needs to be alive to save our universe. Reality is on the brink of death. Ray has the thing that's needed to bring him back. Quinn told Nick. We got a double reason to stop Ray now. You mean besides the fact he killed my granddad? Nick asked. Quinn nodded. We've got work to do. The assassins Nick and Quinn spent almost every day fighting Ray back on Earth, pre-Galactic War. Ray tortured them physically and mentally every moment he had the opportunity. Ray had built some sort of following. He had Andromedans on his side. He was terrorizing the assassins for no other reason than fun. It seemed to Quinn that the Andromedans on his side were brainwashed. Why else would they care about fulfilling Ray's wicked fantasies? Quinn and Nick spent sleepless nights for years after the things Ray had done to them. They only had each other as a means of staying in high hopes, and they built a solid friendship over stopping Ray. The two of them were like family. Nick filled the void left in Quinn's life after Ben died, and Quinn filled the void in Nick's life after his separation from Matrona. They spent years fighting Ray in secret from the public, and every time they fought, Quinn saw the glow of the Sentinel's Revstone. When Ray figured out that Quinn was after it, he would go out of his way to show it off. By the time Quinn was 35 and Nick was 27, it seemed that time had finally caught up to Quinn. She had heard of the Galactic War from the Sentinel and was anxious for it to happen all this time. Because of the knowledge she had, Quinn slowly moved up the government's ranks. She became the Sentinel expert, telling everything she knew about him to the president at the time. Nick was her right-hand man. He only got the job because of Quinn, his experience with Ray, and his natural skills in combat. One day, while Quinn was sitting in her room and Nick was out collecting information on Ray, a red light shone on her wall. The light meant that the president was calling Quinn to his office. For what, she didn't know. She made her way over quickly. Quinn entered the Oval Office, removing her hood as she came in. She held out her hand toward the visitor for a handshake. Quinn Carter, what seems to be the problem? She introduced herself to the stranger and his two friends. Everything, the first Sentinel answered. What? Quinn seemed confused. We could be on the verge of interplanetary war. The first Sentinel spoke quickly as if he was held back. A shape-shifting alien species, the Gars. The man standing with him shape-shifted into his Gar form, startling the president and his guards. Quinn didn't flinch. Hello. The Sentinel's friend Kogar waved. Quinn was trying to process what was happening. She locked eyes with the blonde girl standing with the first Sentinel, Matrona, and all she could think of was Nick. He would want to know where she was. A rebel group of them set up a machine that's going to pull their planet into Earth's orbit, and they're going to invade. The first Sentinel turned his attention to the president. Is that important enough to you? Why did you come to me? The president asked. You're the Sentinel, stop them. Kogar and Matrona looked at the Sentinel. I'm like 2 weeks old. 5 years, Kogar reminded him. Quinn flinched with surprise. Oh, you're new. She suddenly understood that this was the catalyst for the Galactic War when the massive light beam shot out into space, when Rogar's face projected into the sky, declaring an invasion. She feared that she was running out of time to get the Sentinel stone. Now her tasks were doubled. She had to juggle fighting Ray and the start of the Galactic War. Not long after her encounter with the first Sentinel came what she and Nick dreaded the most. Rogar began his invasion of Earth. They weren't ready. Quinn and Nick decided to follow a lead they had on the location of Ray. They zoomed down a road on motorcycles approaching an abandoned warehouse. They parked outside. Quinn armed herself with an Andromedan rifle, and Nick stood at the ready with a revolver in hand. They snuck into the building. Come out, wherever you are, Ray. Nick taunted calmly. We've played this game far too many times, Ray. We know where you are. Show yourself. Quinn looked around cautiously. She glanced up at the sky above, watching as ships entered the atmosphere of Milius Epherium, visible in the night sky. We don't have much time, she whispered to Nick. Give us the stone, Ray, Nick called out. Something scurried past Quinn, and she fired at the ground. Just a rat, she whispered. Come on. Nick gestured around a wall. They stepped out into a clearing in the warehouse, pointing their guns out. Ray stood in the center, holding out his arms.
You found me.
He smiled. He knelt and pointed his remote at Quinn. Nick shot at Ray's hand. The bullet shot right through his gloved palm, rupturing his fingers. Ray dropped the remote and stared at his hand. He shook at his arm, and the invisible shield of Calcarus around him flickered yellow. He looked up at Nick. His smile faded. Calcarus bullets. Nick reloaded the pistol and aimed it at Ray's head. Ray vanished and appeared behind Nick. He grabbed Nick's head, preparing to snap his neck. Quinn yelled and kicked Ray hard on the side of his leg, pushing him down to the ground. The Rev Stone rolled from his pocket and stopped in front of him. "Get it!" Quinn yelled. Nick ran for it, and Ray reached his hand out for it. Nick kicked it out of the way. Quinn jumped, running off the side of the wall, getting herself around Ray. She landed in front of the stone, knelt down, and was about to pick it up when a Gar burst into the warehouse. Quinn turned around. Ray snatched the stone up again. "Quinn!" Nick called out as Ray brandished a blade, which extended from his sleeve. Quinn turned around and blocked the blade with her rifle. The Gar blasted plasma at the three of them with its breath, but Ray blocked it, saving Quinn and Nick by accident. Quinn's watch dinged. She tapped the watch and a hologram shone from it. "Not a good time!" Nick pressed the remote that Ray left behind and pointed it toward the Gar, causing it to turn away.
Hey, hands off the merchandise!
Ray yelled at Nick. "The remote for the stone," Nick demanded.
Do you think I'm an idiot?
Ray laughed. Ray punched Nick in the face and they engaged in a fistfight as Quinn yelled over the hologram. "Sentinel, soldier, what are you doing out there? We can see you." She could see the Sentinel standing outside his lab in New York. "What? How?" said the first Sentinel's hologram, looking around. "We were surveying your house for threats." Quinn checked up on Nick to see if he was alright. He'd already shot Ray twice in the feet with Calcarus bullets and was just reloading while Ray crawled to him. "Alright, well, I figured that Rogar will be after me first. I'll keep him away from everyone else and deal with him, hopefully." The first Sentinel's voice echoed through the watch as Quinn stood around anxiously. "That's crazy, you could get yourself killed," she warned. "I know what I'm doing," the first said stubbornly. "Box, cut all transmissions." The hologram shut off. "Yeah, well, I guess that helps me." Quinn ran after Ray and jumped on top of him, struggling to retrieve the stone from him. Eventually, Ray managed to grab a hold of a band around his wrist and vanished underneath Quinn, teleporting off to somewhere. "Damn it!" Quinn slammed her fist. "We'll get it next time," Nick assured her. "We say that every time. What if there isn't a next time?" Quinn complained. She remembered the danger the first Sentinel was in. "We have to get to New York." Quinn and Nick drove off as fast as they could toward the Sentinel's lab, but by the time they got there, it was too late. They came to a stop at the edge of a cliff by the time ambulances had already arrived. Nick stopped in his tracks, looking over the bodies on the floor. "Is that?" He stared at Matrona's lifeless body. "I was going to tell you sooner." Quinn tried to comfort him. She locked her eyes on the unconscious Sentinel, just newly in his second incarnation, reminded of the limited time she had left to get the stone. The ambulance took Nick and Quinn to the hospital with the unconscious second Sentinel and the body of Matrona. Nick watched as the body bag was zipped up. 12:47. One of the doctors remarked while a nurse wrote on a clipboard. "I'm sorry." Quinn whispered to Nick. "It's okay. I barely remember her." Nick tried to keep himself together. "It's alright. I know how it feels." Quinn patted him on the back. When they arrived at the hospital, Quinn waited by the Sentinel for him to wake up. The second Sentinel slowly lifted his head. "Quinn? Where am I? Why do I sound different?" He turned his head and was met with Matrona's body bag lying on the bed nearest him. Nick stood by it, staring at it. "Is that?" "Matrona. He was declared dead at 12:47 last night. There was nothing we could do, Sentinel." Quinn let the Sentinel know of his transformation and saw that he was stressed. She tried to comfort him with a lie. "Illuciferium is gone." Quinn's voice wavered a bit. It was hard for her to lie to him. "You blew it to bits? Just in time, too. Ugar and Quogar were able to save the innocents. You saved us all." Quinn forced a smile. She needed to get that stone, and soon. As months passed, Quinn and Nick continued searching for Ray to no avail. A meeting was called in the UN building between the president and the friendly Gars, so Quinn and Nick were on lookout duty in New York. A guard ran from the entrance of the UN building, covered in dust and burn marks, out of breath as he pressed his hands on Quinn's shoulder. "Whoa, calm down, what happened?" Nick tried to calm the man. "They're dead," the man blurted out. "The Gars and the president, they're dead." What? Quinn and Nick exclaimed in unison. They ran to the UN room and were met with the bodies of Gars and the president and the various UN officials in the meeting room full of smoke. The lights flickered. Suddenly, a flash of light shone, and in the room appeared Ray. He looked around.
Oh, I guess someone beat me to it.
"Ray!" Nick stepped back. Quinn darted her eyes to Nick. "You take care of Ray, I'll call the Sentinel." "Got it." Nick nodded. He charged at Ray and withdrew his pistol. Ray jumped at Nick and they teleported slightly downstairs. Nick shot at Ray, backing him up the staircase. He spotted the stone shining in Ray's pants pocket, and he continued to approach him. Ray grabbed Nick and tossed him when they reached the top of the stairs, slamming him against a wall. "Where's your remote?" Nick teased.
In the shop.
Ray smiled as he punched Nick in the face, shaking the wall he was pushed up against. He did this a few more times until Nick tilted his head out of the way, and Ray punched the wall, breaking it down. Rapid laser fire blasted through the hole in the wall as smoke and dust blocked their vision. Nick stood up and kicked Ray down the stairs and then followed him. Ray teleported away and Nick thought he'd lost him before he came back holding a remote. He aimed it at Nick and pressed down on the button. Nick fell to the floor and his vision faded. He saw his sister again, young and innocent as he remembered her, but with a hole through her abdomen. Matrona. He held out his hand in desperation. Behind her stood his mother, Amara. Mom? He tried to stand, but as he did, both the figures burst into plasmatic flames. No! He stumbled forward. No! He tried to hold his sister in his arms. Give up, Matrona hissed as she melted in his arms. His vision snapped back and he shook his head. Quinn had Ray pinned to the floor. His arm was pulled back as she leaned back on the floor. Sorry, ran into a bit of a complication when the Sentinel arrived. Was that you shooting? Nick stood up and rubbed his head. Come on, get the stone! Quinn gestured toward Ray. Right. Nick stepped forward but was kicked back by Ray, who sent him flying across the room. Ray's knee seemed to rev a bit mechanically.
Had a few modifications.
Ray's animated screen smiled menacingly as his arm swung over his body and threw Quinn into a wall. Nick quickly righted himself, aimed a Calcus revolver at Ray, and fired. The bullet grazed Ray's side, and he vanished, fleeing the attack. Damn it! Nick caught his breath. The Sentinel killed Zygar. He was behind this. They've allied with the Terrors. Things are escalating. What's the status on the President? Nick asked. The President's dead. Quinn's eyes widened as she leaned over, her knees bent and her arms on them as she leaned against a wall. Who's the Vice? Nick tried his best to stand straight, panting and catching his breath. Quinn turned her attention to him and stood up. Nick, are you kidding? It's me. Not long after Quinn had settled in as the new president did she realize that her time was close to running out. Ray seemed to be using the Andromedans in his control flawlessly in conjunction with the clone army of the past. She had caught word from several spies that replaced her when she became president, including Nick, that Ray was planning on attacking New York. Using technology lent to her by Vax, she was able to manipulate the course of the Sentinel's time travel. She pressed the button and hoped for the best. The Sentinel in his third incarnation appeared in front of Quinn with Vax in her first incarnation. I can see you're alarmed, don't worry. I just rerouted your travel path. She tried to keep the Sentinel calm. Quinn, you scared the living hell out of me for a good second there. How'd you even do that? It's sort of unnerving that that's possible. Calm down. Friends of yours provided us with the necessary tech. It's in good hands. Quinn stood from her presidential seat. She walked past her guards and stood closer to the Sentinel. And we need you. Quinn explained to the Sentinel half of the situation at hand, purposefully leaving details out about Ray, instead saying things like, Sentinel, this is more complicated for me than you'd imagine. When the third Sentinel and Vax left for New York, Quinn waited anxiously to see what would happen, hoping that the Sentinel could take out the Andromedans while leaving ample time for Nick to fight off Ray. Of course, nothing goes according to plan when the Sentinel's involved. Quinn caught wind of the fact that the Sentinel had caused a scene in Times Square, and they needed her help. She was hesitant to send troops at first, but eventually gave in. General? She stood from her seat. I'm going in. Not so sure if that's a great idea, Madam President. I know what I'm doing. Get me my rifle. Quinn stormed out of the Oval Office, ready to fight. She took off for New York by helicopter, landing near the third Sentinel. Quinn, what are you doing here? The third Sentinel yelled. I'm here to help. She fired away at the Andromedans. She got a message from Nick on her watch and she opened the hologram. What is it? She yelled over laser fire. Now's not a good time. Ray's in my sights. Does he know you're there? Quinn asked. No. Then what are you doing making noise? Get the stone. Quinn yelled, then shut off the hologram. Nick snuck around in the subways of New York, following Ray, trying to figure out a plan of attack, but Ray vanished before his eyes. What? Nick whispered. He felt a presence behind him, and his expression quickly shifted, not to fear, but pure annoyance. Oh, you've got to be. He was abruptly cut off by a swift kick in the leg and found himself on the ground. Ray loomed over him, smiling his stupid grin, pointing his remote at Nick. Nick fired the Calcus revolver at Ray's pocket, puncturing the shielding in his pants pocket. On impact, the stone fell from Ray's pocket, rolled on the ground, and landed in Nick's hands. Ray stumbled back in shock. He ignored the pain of the bullet and readied his remote again. Nick closed his eyes and scooted back. The rev stone in his hand began to glow, and a wormhole opened underneath Ray, transporting him off somewhere unknown to Nick. Nick smiled ecstatically and jumped up with joy, holding the stone in the air. Yes! He laughed. His eyes widened, realizing what he had to do next. He called Quinn. Quinn was running toward the injured third Sentinel when she got Nick's call. She answered, and the hologram shone, distracting her for a moment, and as she let her guard down, laser fire from a clone's rifle blasted through her side. Ah! She screamed out and fell to the ground. Quinn? Nick heard the shot and was instantly worried. Ah, shit, Nick, I've been shot. Quinn winced and held her wound. Oh, God, Quinn, it's fine. Quinn struggled through her pain to be heard over the fighting around her. Tell me, what is it? I have the stone. What do I do with it? Nick asked. Nick asked, still worried for Quinn. You have to get it to Vax in the future. Tell me you still remember that, please. I do, but how do I get there? Nick begged. You'll think of something, old friend. Quinn cut off the call. She winced as another wave of pain from her wounds consumed her and she looked around. Hey, I could use some help over here. When the first Sentinel and the first Vax ran to her aid, Vax nervously asked, "Quinn, what do we do?" She cried hopelessly. "We trust in the Sentinel," Quinn smiled, trying to hide her pain. "He's dying!" Vax wiped away her tears. "The Sentinel never dies." Quinn laughed with her final breath. Nick paced around in the subway, stressing over what to do, trying to think of a plan. Then he remembered. He ran from the subway, got on his bike, and drove off for Torreglion, Virginia. He parked his motorcycle outside the quaint town. He walked into his hometown, somewhere he hadn't been in ages. He remembered where his old house was, and he headed straight for it. He stopped in front of his door and took a deep breath. Then, he knocked. The door opened, and on the other end stood a 53-year-old Ayla Tempest. "What do you want?" She groaned, not recognizing Nick. "Ayla." Nick spoke softly. "It's me." Ayla stared at Nick for a second. "Nick?" She hugged him tightly, and tears streamed down her face. "I thought I'd never see you again." She laughed. "Me too," he laughed. Come in, come in." Ayla gestured for Nick to enter the house. It was a mess. "Living alone, huh?" he asked Ayla. Sit. She told Nick to sit in the couch nearest the love seat that Ayla sat down in. "What brings you here?" she asked. Nick held out the revstone in his palm. "The Sentinel." He watched as Ayla's smile faded. Ayla looked up at Nick, concerned. "Don't get involved with him," she whispered. "Amara died with him, and you saw the news, Nick. Matrona's dead too." Ayla wiped away a tear. "Please don't get involved. Ayla, the universe is at stake. And the Sentinel is dead." "What?" Ayla seemed surprised. "This is what's left of him." Nick gestured toward the stone. "My partner and I have been trying to get this stone for years, and we finally have it, but I need to get it to the future," Nick explained. "So you didn't come to see me again?" Ayla's face morphed, now concerned and saddened. "I'm sorry. No," Nick admitted. "What do you want?" Ayla looked away. "I know the Sentinel used to work here a lot. Do you have any of his old stuff lying around? Maybe scrapped time machines?" Nick asked. "I have his old stuff, but I highly doubt there will be anything useful." Ayla stood up and led Nick to what used to be Amara's room. She slid open the closet door and gestured to all the spare parts. "Good luck." She walked back out to the living room. Nick knelt down and dug through the closet. He stumbled across a few attempts at the box. He tried a couple, but none worked. He came across one last one and held it in his hands. Ayla heard a mechanical flash sound from the room, and she closed her eyes. A single tear fell down her face. Nick was gone.